Welcome back, everybody. It's finally cylinder head time. So to get you caught up with what's happening on the bench right here, if you've been keeping up with the channel, you undoubtedly know that the cylinder head was reconditioned by the machine shop, made sure there weren't any cracks in it, planed the surface, put the new old stock valves and the new guides and everything in, retouched the seats, verified protrusion, everything checked out and is all well and good with the head. So that's ready to go back on. New head gasket sitting here, part number 4B4291. That is not only the original number and the manuals, but it is also the current number. They never changed that. Holds true for all of the D3400. So if you have a 3400, that is the part number of head gasket that you will want. Over here at the engine, it has been prepped and is ready. Cylinder head gasket surface is clean and free from oil. Piston tops, cylinders are all clean. I've got the little fuel bleeder elbow out of the fuel conditioning tower. As I mentioned when we were putting this in, this has to be removed in order to let the cylinder head to sit down on the studs, otherwise that will interfere. All of the nuts and washers for the cylinder head are ready to go. Anything that's going to be under the valve cover is completely cleaned of all rust, corrosion, paint, what have you. Anything that's going to be outside of the valve cover still has all the awesome beauty fully intact, except for the contacting surfaces. They are very well clean, but even the edges of the washers still have all that lovely crackled paint. Now, this next part is where I'm pretty sure some people in the comment section are going to want to cringe. It has to do with this container of Permatex Super 300 Forma Gasket Liquid Sealant. It's basically to supplement the sealing surface of the head gasket. I'll explain why, and I'll also explain I've never been a fan of putting anything on head gaskets. The rule has always been put them in dry, but years of experience has made me a believer in this stuff when it comes to these newer steel-cladded head gaskets that are available on the market now. This Super 300 is what the old non-hardening number 2 Permatex used to be. They've changed the formulation of the number 2 and it hardens now, but this stuff stays liquid indefinitely. This is the closest that you'll ever get nowadays to the old number 2 non-hardening Permatex. It's actually some really good stuff. Now, the reason why we need to help out these steel-cladded head gaskets is they just do not seal as well as the old copper-cladded ones did. This is 5J2115's head gasket that was in it when I first got it back in the late 90s. It's the good old copper style, and honestly, it sealed up pretty well, all things considered. When I did the cylinder head on this the first time, and I've told these stories in videos past, this is the gasket that I replaced the good old copper one with, and it is the same steel-cladded construction. I put that thing in there, and it seeped oil something fierce, especially out the pushrod holes on this side. It would come out and just run down the block, and I thought, well, I didn't have the head surface reconditioned back in the day, didn't have any money, was just trying to get the thing to run better. Maybe that was why. Fast forward to, well, several years later, I rebuilt my entire 5U D2, number 7066, and that had a new steel clad head gasket put in it, and that thing seeped oil like crazy. And I had the cylinder head resurfaced on that. I had the block deck. Everything was perfect surface-wise on that, and it leached oil out and down the side of the engine block, something fierce. Found out via the cat boards, ACMOC bulletin board, that Super 300 Permatex is what everybody recommends. Guys that know a lot more than me also recommend it, to just put a thin layer on the head gaskets. It helps them to seal, and pretty much it stops that oil seepage problem. So I pulled the head back off of 7066 after it was painted and beautiful and perfect, and cleaned everything off, put that Super 300 on there, put the head back on, torqued it down, did the following ensuing torque sequences at the proper intervals, and that thing has not seeped a drop since. So every one of these steel-clad head gaskets that I buy anymore gets a light coating of this. This is the only time I ever put anything on a head gasket, but 1113 is getting the same treatment today. Okay, both sides of the head gasket, just a light coating, brush it on is all you need. As you can see, I still don't get real worried about getting too close to the combustion sealing rings because, you know, putting stuff on head gaskets I'm still not completely right with. But like I say, I have learned through experience that it is a big help in these old Caterpillar applications. You ready?
Yep.
All right, and with the help of Senior, you can guide the head down on the studs.
Looks like we're down here.
Yep, down here. Just finishing up dropping the last of the flat washers over the head studs right now. Light coating of oil on both sides. The threads are also getting a light coating of oil. And with those finished, start the cylinder head nuts now. Alright, everything is snugged down and it's time to begin the torque sequences. And yes, for the torque monsters out there, this is one of the few instances where the D3400 manual not only gives us torque specs, but torquing sequences to adhere to as well. So we'll do 60 pound-feet in sequence the first time, bump it up to 80 pound-feet, do the sequence a second time. And it says, note, in case a new head gasket has been used, warm the engine and retighten the nuts to a final value of 58 pound-feet. So after we get this thing running, we've put it through a heat cycle once or twice, we'll let it cool back down and we'll go back around to check them all again, make sure everything is well and good. And even after 100 hours, we might even check them again. Now the 80. So those were pretty much the highlights of the cylinder head torquing sequence. What you did not see on camera was I actually did 3 sequences at 60 and I did 3 sequences at 80. That ensures that as the head gasket and everything compresses, all of the fasteners end up being at an equal torque, because when you start out in the middle, you are exerting force on a pretty large area that is not at that torque, and as you work out, things will compress and get tighter, and then when you go back to the middle, all of a sudden that one's a little bit loose. So by the third sequence of each one, movement had pretty much ceased and everything was at an even torque. So next up was going to be installing those pre-combustion chambers, but regardless of what I said in the last video where I had this whole bench behind me loaded up with parts and I was bragging about how I had everything I needed to go for a while, I'm already at a standstill. The old saying, pride goeth before the fall. Well, I'll show you what was happening. So we have these copper sealing rings that go beneath the pre-combustion chambers, and I usually back those up with a little bit of copper coat, because not only are the seats on the chambers not pristine anymore, these aren't too bad, but you know, they're not new, and the seats in the cylinder head are about the same way. Those are not horrible, but like I said, they're not what they used to be. So trouble is, I found that my can of copper coat, I think, is expired. No good. So I went on Amazon and I ordered up a new one, and you know, with them prioritizing food shipments and, you know, necessities like that in these times, it's probably going to be at least 10 days before I get my copper coat. So, you know, no big deal. I understand. So what we're going to do is roll on into kind of some busy work. It's all stuff that needs to be done anyway. We're going to start studding that thing up. We got a bunch of manifold studs and everything, hardware ready to go here. And we have the rocker assemblies right here. These are 1113s and they haven't been cleaned up or really touched at all yet. You can see the studs got a little bit rusty. This one still has the nut stuck on it, but somebody at one time got really happy with the vice grips on these things. All 4 of these are really chewed up below the threaded areas. So I have a better set here out of the junkyard D3400. But as is typically the case with this project, it's not as simple as just swapping out the 1113 originals with studs from a much later D3400, because the later ones are different. We'll go to the parts manual right here. From 5J1 up to 1239, they had a slightly shorter stud that went through that rocker stand and extended up through the valve cover and held the valve cover on. They had these cap nuts on the earlier ones like this up on top of the cover, retaining everything. But effective with 5J1240 and on up, they went to a longer stud that had a nylock type nut on the top, so that nylock portion necessitated a slightly longer threaded end. So that is our difference. We'll compare them side by side. Here's an 1113 original. Here is the much later junkyard engine. You can see everything is the same up until you get to the top. These ones out of the junkyard engine are a little bit longer. So there's no reason why we can't trim these things down, make some clones. Everything else is all right for dimensions, so that's what we're going to do. So I'll do a rough cut to length on each one with the hacksaw, and then trim them to final length and taper the points with the lathe. All right, quick comparison here. The clone versus the original. And we have the length pretty darn close between the two. And I even worked to replicate the slight taper that's put around the outside diameter of the originals. The junkyard engine ones did not have that. They were pretty well squared off on the top, but they used that open top nylock nut. So I didn't know if they put that taper on there to conform to the inside of these early cap nuts that held the valve cover on. I don't know. Regardless, the tapers were put in there anyhow. So we have those ready to go. We have the manifold studs ready. A couple other minor things we could probably put on. So let's just keep busy on that head. So after all that work, we're not using vice grips to put these in. I'll double nut them like I usually do. It's a convenient and painless way to get a stud installed. It doesn't leave any permanent marks. Lightly oiled the threads at the base, and these are meant to be somewhat of an interference fit, because, you know, as you bolt the rocker stands down and you're taking the valve cover fasteners on and off, they don't want these things turning out of the cylinder head, so they make sure that the threads are rather tight. And no marks, still looks good. So I think I'll put all these manifold studs in down this side of the head, and we'll call it a video. I've already got all the double nuts loaded on each one, so we can just turn them in that way. Might as well use this opportunity for a little story time. A couple people in the comment section have mentioned lately they'd like to hear stories. Well, one I can think of is goes back to 2002. Albany Pioneer Days Tractor Show, Albany, Minnesota, and they had ACMOC Club had its national meet there that year, as did the HCEA, Historical Construction Equipment Association. And probably to this day, one of the best Caterpillar and earth moving shows I've ever been to in my life. They had more stuff there, huge working show, demonstrations going on. They had a dirt moving project, and it was just awesome. And that was, like I said, I believe it was 2002, and I was still running 2115 at that time. And looking around at all of the pristine condition machines that were there, and guys out dozing with the cats, with the scrapers moving dirt, just stuff going on all over. Really nice machines. Everything was looking good, running well, operating well. I would have given anything to have had a D2 that I could have been out there in the dirt moving area and just having fun. 2115 was not a machine that was ever going to make it to a show, because by that point I had had that since 1999. I had spent as much time and as much money as I could trying to fix it, trying to get it to run better, doing everything on the periphery outside of rehabbing base engine. And that's the problem. The base engine on that thing was just more than worn out. And honestly, I was kind of embarrassed of it. It had that homemade headache rack on, you know, over the operator's platform. It had the homemade fuel tank on the back. It had this old crackled paint, and I'm looking around all these other D2s and all these other cats out there that are clean, straight machines. They don't smoke. I mean, they run like they should. They operate like they should. And honestly, well, I didn't have the means to haul a machine to a show back then anyway, but I was just walking around awestruck. I was loving every minute of it. That was, like I said, to this day, still one of the best Caterpillar and earth moving equipment shows I think I've ever attended. And I do remember I talked to Chuck Schapelski there. Now I know Chuck, he watches the channel here. He had his D2 out there that year. It's a 5U. I don't remember if he had a scraper with it. He's got a nice little scraper that goes behind it, but I know he had his 5U out there. I actually talked to him briefly that weekend, and I don't know that Chuck would even remember this, because it's been a while ago, and back then I'm this 20-year-old kid just kicking around trying to learn things, and had an interest in this old equipment and stuff. But I'm like, man, all these nice machines, all these nice cats, someday I'm gonna have a really nice D2 that I can bring to a show. And that kind of lit the fire under me. Of course, I was working on the Minneapolis Plain prototype crawler X253 at that time. And it took me a few years to get that finished, but once I did, I was able to find a 5U D2 for sale near me. Pretty much a total wreck, like most of the things I bring home. And it turns out that was 7066, the 5U that I have now, the old Iron Mistress. It's all painted up nice. And I've done several videos with dozing it and how to drive a D2 with it. We'll pop some links up here for you. You can go revisit that if you'd like. But started repairing 7066 in 2006, and it took me until about 2009 to get it done. And it was another restoration. Well, that was a true restoration. I did the mechanical, I did paint, I did everything, but that was another one where I did mechanical down to bare castings, just like I'm doing 1113 here. Built the entire thing back up piece by piece, and there was not an area on that machine that did not get extensive attention. And pretty much went through the entire thing, made it so that it runs and drives and operates like it should, gave it a fresh new coat of paint, and I finally had a D2 that I could be proud of. I could take around to shows, have a good time with. And I've done that. I've had 7066 quite a few different places, even as far down as Edgerton, Wisconsin. I believe it was the 2015 ACMOC National Show down there. I got old 7066 down there for that. And the thing I like about 1113 here is it kind of brings everything full circle, because I was embarrassed of 2115 back in the day, because I mean, face it, the thing was just flogged out. But the fact that I can let it live on in some way with 1113, I mean, like this is the old crackled paint that was on it back in the day when I was kind of embarrassed of it. It's kind of a full circle thing, and honestly, having so many of that machine's pieces go into a rebuild like this, I'm actually proud of it. I mean, I like this crackled paint in this case. I look at this, that's what it looked like back when my grandpa had it. That's what it looked like when I got it, when I was doing all that work on it back in the day, trying to make it better and learning a lot in the process. That machine it was more than worth its weight in gold as far as just the knowledge and experience factor that I gained working on it, because it didn't matter what piece of it I looked at, there was something wrong with that piece. You know, the whole thing was just like that. And this will figures, somebody starts texting me in my story. But you know, it's just like I said, this is kind of a full circle thing. Basically, I'm proud of 2115. I'm proud of 1113. I'm proud of like everything I've put together here, trying to make this just as good as I possibly can make it. And the goal is to get this out to the shows someday. And it'll really be something go out and driving at a show or taking on the parade lap with the old crackled paint and the things I used to be embarrassed about. I'm downright proud of now. You know, that's just one of the rewards of going to all the through all the effort and time and expense and everything else to fix up these old machines. All right, cylinder head is all studded out and it's ready to start accepting components. Man, am I glad this is the head that ended up on this engine. I just wouldn't change a single thing about it. It's like mechanical redemption, you could say. So, not really sure what I'm going to do next. I might keep rolling right along with valve train components, but I could work on a thermostat housing. I could work on a water pump. I'll do something. A little bit of an unexpected setback with those pre-combustion chambers, but that's kind of typical of my experience with those things. They've always fought me every step of the way on every machine I've ever tried to work on them on, so it's not surprising that they're still fighting me, even though all I have to do is put them back in. Anyway, not a big deal. So I can tell by the files on the camera, this is probably gonna be a long video. It might take me 2 days to get it to upload. I don't know. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you were entertained. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you back again.